Video, we have audio. I think we're good. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of ISS. Hope you have had a wonderful conference so far. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to just do some brief introductions, but we have just been really excited about seeing this content coming through in a lot of our different sessions. Obviously, Chaz with this opening plenary really set us up well to continue that conversation. There was another session yesterday in regard to disability language, and so it's just really exciting because this is not the kind of content that would necessarily have been a part of this conference and this conversation a couple of years ago even. So really excited to be opening up this conversation even more. So I'm going to start with introductions. My name is Heather Feldner. My pronouns are she, her. And I currently work at the University of Washington in Seattle, where I'm a member of the Rehab Medicine Department. I'm also on the core faculty of the Disability Studies program there. And I help run an accessibility center called CREATE, which has a really long name that's up on the screen, which is why we call it CREATE. Just in terms a little bit about my positionality as it applies to these topics. I'm a cisgendered white female. I have children who identify as disabled. I myself am kind of in a transition process. I do not identify as having a mobility disability, but I do have some other invisible disabilities. And so although I study mobility technology academically, I don't use it on a daily basis. And that really limits my perspectives that I can bring to this topic. I'm going to let Andrina and Jean introduce themselves as well. I did also want to make a quick note about captions. We tried to use my computer, which would have put live captions up on the screen, but there is a captioning link, a Zoom link. If anyone needs that, we have that pulled up here as a resource. But if you had requested captions, hopefully we got emailed the PDF for the captions for the room for today. So I apologize, we couldn't have it live for everybody.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrina Sabet. I'm a physical therapist from Cleveland, Ohio. I split my time professionally between Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital and my own company, Mobility Matters. I also am a cisgendered white woman. My pronouns are she, her. I also do not identify as having a mobility disability. I am a caregiver for a disabled individual, so that does impact my perceptions around these topics. But again, I do not have lived experience within the mobility disability space.
I'm short. So I need to move the microphone. My name is Minkel. I'm a physical therapist by background and training and have been involved in the mobility industry for a really long time. And certainly over the last 4 or 5 years have become really interested in co-creation and really engaging in partnership. I think I always try to use that in my professional practice, but really putting the voice of the consumer up front is a new perspective, and certainly, hopefully, that'll be evident in today's presentation. I run a mobility clinic called On a Roll in Brooklyn and Bronx, New York, and have thoroughly enjoyed long-term relationships with people with disabilities, and was smart enough, early enough, like, shut up and listen, because boy, you can learn a lot from people with the lived experience. So if you don't learn anything else today, hopefully that's a learning objective that you will have accomplished.
And we do have one more coat. I'm tall, so we have to work on the order when we speak. We have one more co-presenter who couldn't join us in person today, but I'm going to play you her introduction as well. And I also do want to make a note about language. You're going to hear us use both identity first language and person first language today. throughout the talk and throughout the videos that we're going to share. And we do that really intentionally to just kind of recognize that there are a lot of different perspectives on language and that it's also really powerful, but also sometimes contested, and people have different preferences about that. So we chose to use both in this talk just because that reflects the preferences of the communities that we work with and our own identities as well. So we'll play Kayla's introduction.
Hello, my name is Kayla Brown. I work for the DUIT program at the University of Washington, and I'm also a doctorate student at Seattle University. I identify as having multiple disabilities. My background is in social work and disability activism.
And we have no disclosures to report for this content.
So just a quick overview of what we hope to accomplish and what our learning objectives are. And we talk a lot about the diversity, inclusion, equity, and lots of isms. And we're going to dive into ableism and one of the challenges around inspirational narratives and how it's a potentially unintended consequence, and how the disability community really has strong opinions and hopefully will begin to influence some of our both professional and personal behaviors around describing people with disabilities, engaging with people with disabilities. We also want to be talking about micro-conceptions that are perpetuated by that inspirational narrative. And microaggressions, but this says, misconception. Hence my hidden disability. Compare the impact of the misconceptions and mobility acceptance, and then to list 3 professional and occupational constructs that will facilitate an alternative perspective and a professional practice. And that's really about internal work. And a friend of mine always says, you have to claim it and name it to tame it. So hopefully some of today will be kind of an awareness, which is really the first step towards understanding a change in professional and occupational practices. So let's get the conversation started. So first of all, we're asking the group over the last 2 years, what have been your experiences around diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I think Chaz really did set the stage, and there was a milestone moment, particularly in the United States, with the George Floyd tragedy and the reaction in society. And so we're curious, in your either personal and or professional roles, what was your DEI experience over the last 2.5 years? Just a couple of hands, people want to.
And we're going to ask everyone to use the microphone because it's an excellent accessibility practice. Trying to be inclusive as we go here.
Putting shoes on, by the way.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lester Bennett. I'm glad to see everyone, but over the last 2 years, I see that the reality was George was like not so much the starting point, but like really like Trayvon and how those two connected. So over the last 2 years, I've loved to see that fight that I was truly having before George, that in reality, we were in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody had nothing else to do. So we really used that to say, we're going to do something. So over the last 2 years, I like to say I'm thankful that we've been able to kind of see some of the things that we need to fix in our world. And if we're going to say George, yes, but let's make sure we understand it. Like the reality was that there's a Trayvon prior, and 2020 was more of a, we didn't have nothing else to do.
Thank you. Excellent.
in where I teach and AOTA and some of the things, it seems like a lot of the diversity is around race and socioeconomic and less about disability, age, obesity, like all the, hearing loss, all the sort of other diversity and equity and some things that I myself have. And so I would just like to encourage people to broaden those definitions of what we all talk about.
Absolutely. Excellent point.
Yeah, so I have become a founding member of a DEI committee in the nonprofit that I've been part of for the last 11 years. For youth with scoliosis, basically is it's a sort of a patient led sort of support nonprofit, and so I do a lot of the disability based DEI work with that. And I agree with that. A lot of people do not consider it, but also I've tried to join other DEI committees in various other spaces, and sometimes they're simply performative and they don't do much.
Awesome.
Okay, we have one
We're
more.
doing one more. Yep.
I think like overall, we all know the pandemic was a really difficult time for everyone. But like kind of the bittersweet moment was that all of these accommodations, like how do we get rural kids Wi-Fi? How do we get inner city kids Wi-Fi? How do we get all these other DEI initiatives going when like disabled people have been asking for this stuff forever? And so it's like, hello.
And miraculously, in 90 days.
Thank you for all of these amazing points. And wow, it's happening, which is so exciting. There's actually an amazing poem by Aurora Levins Morales about that very thing. It's called Zoomlandia. And it was, if anyone's familiar, it's a really powerful poem. But it talks about just that. It's like accessibility and accommodation for remote work and learning wasn't a mainstream thing until we all needed it. But yet people with disabilities have been advocating for that for years and years and years. It's very, very powerful.
So we touched a little bit, about what is a, and Amber, I think you really hit it on the head that so often it's gender and race and socioeconomic, and it's like some of us are like, and disability, which magnifies all of the other inequities. So we often talk about disability as a magnifier of the inequities, and it's universal. And our last one is how often has ableism actually been a part of the discussion? And it's so interesting to me, particularly in a professional organization that supports people with physical disabilities. The discussion is at the professional level. And it's like, okay, folks, we're looking at the mirror. What of our practices are reinforcing ableism? And we had a session earlier and somebody said, we really want to express what our clients can do, what the beauties of their life are, what their interests are. And yet we're forced to write letters that say all the things that they can't do. And there's just a kind of a tangible example of, let's put those assets up front, because it's tough to be an invalid all the time.
Anybody with comments on those?
So I'm a master's student and new to the field. But over the past few years, like a lot of our manufacturers and reps and stuff, they've been updating their websites to have more inclusive images of people. And one of the things they like to do is to take pictures of their technicians and their clinicians who use, mobility aids, and then post them online. So like coming into this as a student, I was expecting there to be a lot more wheelchair users here who work in the field. And that was kind of disappointing. A weird form of ableism.
Thank you. Let's see, how many do we?
Yeah, and like also similar, I'm a student, a master's student in the prosthetics and orthotics realm. I was a patient on the orthotic side, which is how I became interested. And I have like 30 plus invisible disabilities, and they're all very high impact, but people don't see them, and they don't put two and two together that like there are so many things your body does for you that if like anything goes a little bit awry, it can make a big impact on your life, and not all of them are visible and not all of them are walking.
Right.
And then the other part is that I often talk about, I think ableism as a name is a misnomer, because it's not about ability. Ability is not the opposite of disability. Basically disabled, the opposite of that is enabled. So has somebody been enabled to access their environment, or have they been disabled from accessing their environment? And so I really don't like the mischaracterization of it as being that, in terms of like there are certain things that, yes, like perhaps like no matter how much you adjust your environment, maybe there are some levels of aspects that remain that are not environmentally impacted. But I think the most important thing is really just like addressing the environment, because that's the easiest thing to adjust.
I just have a really quick one. I have an OT friend who uses a wheelchair. She has just graduated with her master's, and she's applying for a job in inpatient rehab, and they've decided they don't want to hire her because she's a potential liability.
Oh my God.
For, transfers and whatnot.
She fought this battle 40 years ago. Craziness. If folks don't mind, if this is our last comment, we have, oh, good. Okay. We have our friend. I just did this quick. There we go.
So ableism is a term you also may have heard, but we just want to define it so we're all on the same page as to what it means. So ableism is a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with disabilities, and often rests on the assumption that disabled people need to be fixed in one form or another. Ableism is very intertwined in our culture. It informs what people think disability does or does not mean. It influences how people learn to treat people with disabilities, and it contributes to people with disabilities being excluded from leadership. And so we've got a couple images on the screen that I'll describe. The first one is there was an individual with short hair in a wheelchair, and they're trying to fit through, it looks like, a door frame or some sort of thresholds. They cannot fit because the door was not made wide enough for them to get through. And there are other ambulatory people walking alongside them who can fit in those respective thresholds. There's also an image down below. It's a drawing of 3 individuals with disabilities, various disabilities. One is using a cane. We can assume maybe they have a visual impairment, one's in a wheelchair, and then there's one other that I cannot recognize their disability. It may be invisible, but they're looking up. They're inside a building with multiple levels, and they're kind of looking up towards the ceiling. So I want to make sure that I describe the images as best I can for you all. So the systemic effects of ableism. So we talked about what ableism is, right? But now we're going to go and see the actual impact of it. So some disparities in things like education, health, transportation, employment, and even research. Those are some disparities that we see because of ableism, as well as identity development. So there's a lot of stigma and shame and covering, and also the activism and pride that come from ableism. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that activism side looks like. But there are a lot of things that we don't really think about as being the effect of all of these attitudinal and physical barriers towards people with disabilities. such as education, right? That's one of the disparities. Less people with disabilities are getting college degrees. So where does that come from? We have to look at it as a system. We know that health, there's less access to things like mammograms, weight loss, and other kind of medical equipment challenges. So these are things that occur because of the systemic ableism we have in our society. And so ableism can be attitudes, it can be physical space, but it can also be the language that we use, the everyday interactions that we have with people. So there are things called microaggressions, which are small interactions that you may have throughout the day, small things that have big impact. So they're not intentional typically, but here's some examples of some microaggressions and kind of what the message is that follows. So one microaggression is she suffers from hearing loss. He's in a wheelchair, he's bound or confined to it. So the theme of that microaggression is that disability is a tragic loss that limits or restricts. The message is that language assumes disability is a negative trait that needs to be fixed. When people have disability or feel that disability is a positive identity. Another microaggression is I'm really OCD today, or I misspelled something, I'm so dyslexic right now. So the theme of that is that disability is a minor or common experience that can be used as a punchline. So it belittles the seriousness of the conditions that disabled people have. So, and then another microaggression that we'll talk more about is you are so inspirational. Your work, that's so amazing. You've achieved that in spite of your disability. And this is a theme that's called inspiration porn, which we'll talk more about. And the message there is that we're making a big deal out of people with disabilities doing everyday things, and it promotes the idea that they are lesser people. So this brings us to inspirational narratives. So many of us are bombarded with images and headlines and other types of media every day. And the narratives of those images for disabled people is often something that we call inspirational narratives or inspiration porn. And so there are a lot of memes, right? These pictures that are meant to convey a message that are passed around social media quite often. And many of you may have heard of phrases like, disability in life is about attitude, or something similar. And so I've got two examples of images on the screen that both say disability in life is about attitude. The first one shows a little girl in prosthetics who's running alongside an athlete who also has prosthetics. And then the second image, it shows two people doing pull-ups, probably in a gym. One of them is still in their wheelchair. So it's conveying that, oh, you can do this even though you're in a wheelchair. And it also conveys the message that, you can't complain if you can't do this because there are people in wheelchairs who are also doing it. So we'll talk more about those narratives as well. I have more examples of some of these images that we're inundated with. And like I said, oftentimes they're called inspiration porn because they're objectifying people with disabilities. And so inspiration porn is found in all sorts of memes. In fact, late Australian comedian and activist Stella Yin, she talks about this subject in a TED Talk she gives, which we're going to show momentarily. But she describes how this terminology has been very deliberately applied here as it objectifies people with disabilities to elicit some sort of emotion in the able-bodied viewer, right? So to make them feel better about their own circumstances. So, there are more images here. Typically, these ones are portraying people with disabilities as inspirational solely because of their disability, not any other context that we have from them, other than the action that they're doing in the image. So there's the first one that I have. It says, "Before you quit, try." It's got this child who is a double amputee and is using a pencil, drawing while holding a pencil in their mouth. And so, before you quit, try. Right. And then another one shows a child in a wheelchair that's meant to be for playing sports. This child is holding a basketball and they're on a court, and it says, "Your excuse is invalid." And then the third image shows a person in a wheelchair going up a hill that has a lot of rocks on it, and it says, "You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice." Is your only choice. And that's a quote by Bob Marley that's overlaid on the image. And so inspiration porn is harmful because it objectifies disabled people first and foremost. It fails to capture the rich and diverse experience of disability. Not all disabilities are people in wheelchairs. And so it narrows down what we see as disability. It sets low expectations for disabled people. And it makes disabled people feel as though their purpose is to inspire others. Inspiration porn does not celebrate or uplift disabled people. And there's one last line. It's a person in a manual wheelchair on a beach. They have long hair and their arms are outstretched towards the water, the ocean. And it says, "Never ignore somebody with a disability. You don't realize how much they can inspire you. Share if you agree." As mentioned before, we're going to be watching a TED Talk by Stella Young. And I'm going to give a quote that you will see in the video that is very powerful. So she says, that quote, "The only disability in life is a bad attitude. The reason that's bullshit is no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a ramp. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshelf and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn those books into Braille." So I really hope that you enjoy the TED Talk from Stella Young.
This is exactly why you need to hear it from people with lived experience rather than us. So here we're going to play from the Stella excerpt. And the link is on the bottom there. Up here. Maybe we're going to play Stella. So this was embedded too, is that it should just play on click, but it doesn't. So do I need to pull it out from the YouTube link or? Oh. So are we, so. So it's embedded into the video. But even if I open it up, if this computer doesn't have Wi-Fi, that's a problem, right?
We're building to the climate.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we put it to my phone hotspot maybe?
Yeah. Possibly. Let me I'm gonna grab my laptop and just pull it up
Okay.
here real quick, maybe.
Okay.
Because this laptop in particular, that's all time with it too.
Okay. Okay. During the intermission, does anyone have any comments or questions? This computer is not even hooked up to Wi-Fi. Yep. No, it's it's YouTube video, so it's online. My computer's hooked up to Wi-Fi, which we were. Yeah, I think we're gonna try that. Yeah, I think he's trying to get it connected onto the. So apparently this computer has connectivity issues to Wi-Fi. Technology. Yeah. We originally had my computer hooked up and it was blinking on the screen, but it was connected to Wi-Fi. So I wonder, do you want to go ahead and
Okay. They're in the link there real quick.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Wait, give her the mic. Yeah.
We're gonna get this going.
Yeah.
So, hello. I'm Kendra. I live in Colorado and many of you know, so my significant other is blind and we ski. We're badass skiers. And we ski well, we ski fast. We wear bibs, blind guide, blind skier. We wear helmets with motorcycle radios so we can talk like it's time for a body break. There you go. And people literally, I'm in line and someone will tap and say, literally so inspirational. And I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? Like it's Saturday afternoon, like that. Because it's just what you're doing, right? And it's so inspirational. I'm like, no.
You don't know
And they're like, oh, are you
what the
an
title
instructor?
of the video is if I just search this.
Okay. Big round, great time. And it's nice and it's good intention. The other thing is our adult children, but our adult children going, oh my God, mom, you know, they're taking pictures. Are you guys aware they're taking pictures of you? And I'm like, I don't care. You know, I don't care if someone's taking a picture, but I usually do walk up and say, if you want the good stuff, you should video us while we're blasting past you, you know, or come and ski a run with us, you know, come and ski a run. So I don't care if someone's taking a picture, but having that conversation, my favorite is a teenager or someone coming up and saying, how does that work? Is he really blind? And how does that work? And then we go, oh, we got radios and it's really cool. I mean, I love the question, but we do get that of like, oh, so inspirational. Another comment I will make in terms of like our bias. And our co-presenter. Our bias. I'm going to say this as we're pulling it up. Our bias is we as wheelchair enthusiasts in this building would all notice if there's a ramp missing or somebody has to go the long way. How many of you at this conference for the last 3 days noticed the inconsistency of labeling the men's room and the ladies? Oh, yes. You know, there's a fear, right?
And,
Like,
I'll come and swap back to the.
there's no
conference if we're done with
consistency,
the-
right?
There's
It's the
another
ladies'
YouTube
room.
video right after it,
Okay.
so I'll just type that in and
Visual
we'll just do it the old fashioned
Okay.
way. No,
There you
that's
go.
okay.
You don't even need a visual impairment. It's still.
Okay, we have two computers now. One for our YouTube videos, the other one for our embedded videos, but here we go. Here's Stella. Pretty powerful stuff, right? The link for that video, you can look it up, Stella Young, but we have the link in our slides that we will be happy to share with you all after the presentation. I'm going to play a clip of one more that kind of flips the narrative of being inspiring on its head. It's from a comedian in the UK. So just bear with me because I need to type in the old-fashioned way here. It's so worth it is worth the wait. And I also apologize in advance because the YouTube video for this next one did automated captions and they're very terrible.
Wildin' Out, new season, Thursday, April 6th at 9 on VH.
That looks fascinating.
Hi, yes, you are. Oh, it's so inspiring. Well done. Just wanted to say you do a great job. Thank you. Really inspirational. Is that the people? Yeah, right. I just thought someone like yourself would know where it was. Have a good day. Cheers. You can walk down the steps. How did you do that? That's so inspiring. I've been stuck here for a minute. Are you a Jehovah's Witness? Oh, that's so inspirational.
Have you spoken to us before? Okay, I'm just gonna skip ahead here.
Right. Inspirational.
The best part.
Oh, did you go to the toilet by yourself? It's so inspiring how people like you can take care of yourselves. Thank you for your sticker. Says I'm inspired. Well done. Very well done.
Worth the wait, right? Worth the wait, yeah. Okay, we're gonna flip back to our other computer here, so just give us a second. If anyone has any more comments, we'll come around with the microphone. We will still need audio, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Give it up for our AV guys.
Yes. Wow, this is amazing. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. So we wanted to just share a couple of more of the inspiration narratives that are specific to mobility technology that you may or may not have seen. And so the top left one is a picture of a couple at prom, and the quote on the clip says, he asked her to prom even in her condition, like and share equals respect, right? We see a lot of these, right? Promposals, where they would not be really any different than anything else, but disability is part of the equation, right? So it becomes that inspiration. The one on the left, there's a person in a manual wheelchair who is reaching up for a bottle on a top shelf. And the quote associated with this is, there's been a miracle in the alcohol aisle because no one uses a wheelchair and also uses their legs, right? And then the bottom one is kind of a backdrop of someone leaning down, talking to an individual in a manual wheelchair as well. And it says, challenges are what make life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. So just another kind of visual of these images that we're bombarded with. It's in the headlines too, right? We think about the language that's used around disability and the storylines that are used around disability. Here's one example. It's a person doing a flip at a skate park in their sports chair. And the quote is, "Disabled man defies his condition by using his wheelchair to do backflips in a skate park, excuse me." That would be fun to do backflips in a state park as well. The second one is just a headline that reads, "Although her wheelchair helps her get around, Janet has been working hard with PT Bethany to no longer need it and gain back her independence," because you can't be independent if you use wheeled mobility, right? And this is one that hits close to home for Andrina and I. And this one is a news headline, and it reads, "High school robotics team builds electric wheelchair for 2-year-old whose family couldn't afford one." And this is about a family who got a Go Baby Go car, which number one is not an electric wheelchair. Number two doesn't address the real issue at hand, that their insurance company was denying this child a right to commercial mobility, right? But we see these, it's very inspiring that this robotics team went and did that. It's cool stuff, right? But it's not the solution. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrina.
All right, so our professionals inspiration adjacents. So this is a call to action for everybody here to really examine how our own individual biases may be affecting what we do in this area. And I think Chaz really said it well when he said we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this is a really uncomfortable space when you start to think about how your well-intentioned actions may be perceived differently by the people that you are working with. So this is just a couple of examples about how professional roles can kind of play into some of these narratives. And the first is the idea around a caring or helping profession. When you look at things from just a caring or helping perspective, it sets up a power differential between the helper and the person that is being helped. And I would rather reframe that to where we have more collaborative partnerships with the people that we are working with, and realizing that we're all bringing something to the table to make decisions around mobility technology. The second example up here is a biomedical context. And what this refers to is that idea that impairments don't happen in isolation. All of us are living and going out into the world, and we can't just look at health in a building or as a pathology. And that's kind of where the ICF model comes in, where it attempts to really correlate some of those social determinants of health into the picture. And I can speak for myself and my experiences with my son when we are at a doctor's office and there's no acknowledgement for what our actual experience is, but yet they are trying to help us or solve our problems. And there's just such a disconnect, so what their suggestions don't even provide anything useful. And then the third area is this idea of curing or fixing. And we're going to watch a video that perpetuates this idea. Maybe. Oh, it's going to be the same thing. All right. So I think we're going to skip this one, but I'm just going to kind of describe it. What is this from? Is this from Glee? This was from Glee. And this is a scene where Andy is in a wheelchair, and he is with his friend. They're at the mall, they're shopping, and she's going to go up and buy him a pretzel. And he stops her and says, "Hey, you know, I wanted you to know that I took your advice and I went to the doctor, and all those therapies you researched and all those medications, well, we started them yesterday. And look, they're working." And then he proceeds to get up and go into a big dance scene. And then at the very end of the scene, he falls back dejected into his wheelchair with a very sad look on his face, because it was really just kind of more of a fantasy. But I think what was important about this clip is really looking at that idea. And I think we see this, or at least I can see this in my profession as a physical therapist, where the wheelchair is looked at as some sort of failure. And we really need to focus more of our efforts on curative or not needing the wheelchair in the first place.
as time ticks by here. Uh, so we really want to impart to you some perspectives where the system puts us in a position and just being reflective for yourself. So in decision making with clients and families, and we may be using protective strategies like, do you show somebody a product that might not be covered? Are you inclined to make some assumptions about somebody's resources without giving people the chance to see what the options are and then make a resource allocation question for themselves? And again, our intent may be, I don't want someone to feel bad that they can't have access to something. Unfortunately, the impact then is they don't even know what's out there that could make a big difference that they could choose to use their resources towards. I know I am a party to this problem of the expert culture around assistive technology design or any design in the real mobility world. And, someone will say, oh, I really want you to look at this product and look at our prototype. And I've gotten much more comfortable with saying, have you talked to any end users? Because I can give you a really warped perspective of what I'm looking for as a clinician, but the end user's experience is going to be so much more powerful to you in what the end design is. And frankly, I love to be a part of the sessions where the end users are giving their feedback and I gain a much more holistic perspective as to what design can and should be. And I think it really flips the question of, are you building to a need? Is the need being perceived by the end user? So if you are asked as the expert, be sure to include, and co-creation is just so important and not used often enough in our industry. And thirdly, I am the dinosaur and Neanderthal in the room here. Good news is I don't do a lot of social media, but how often do you see those inspirational posts and they're going forward and, oh, look at this young person. Look how much they're struggling and they're gaining ambulation. And don't you just want to scream? Like, they could be really functional in the chair that fits them. So just caution. And it is a place where you can inform other people. I'll give you a personal example. My brother's older than I am. And in the Boston area, there's this Shriners ad. And the cute little kid and the blankie. And he's like, isn't this a cool ad? And it was like, I lost it. And it was like, no, it's terrible. It is so degrading and is a charity mode. And he's like, oh, I didn't know you feel so strongly about it. But I think that's what we have to do in our allyship. We only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up here. Okay. So what are some alternative narratives? We wanted to leave you with some of these and also share some resources about how we can all be better allies within our communities, both personal and professional. And these videos are embedded, so they're gonna work when I click. Yay. And this first one does not have any sound. And if we would have shown you the Artie dance clip, this would be more of a juxtaposition, but this hopefully gives us a different alternative in terms of dance. Oh, maybe not. Oh, it's a YouTube video too. anyway, it's a beautiful integrated it's a beautiful integrated dance clip of people from a variety of disabilities, and it's awesome music. And I'm sorry that with all of these technical things. And so we wanted to share some of our favorite allyship resources with you all that hopefully can be taken back and shared. I mean, this is just, again, one part of our bigger conversation, one part of our journey to become as inclusive as possible. The first one there is actually a bystander training to support the disability community in public. For all of the instances that have been shared about that unwanted, contact or question. The second one is actually a checklist that we can all use and learn from about creating more accessible events, such as conferences. And that's just a University of Washington resource that we have. Actually, that's the third one. No, that's the second one. The third one is some different Disability Alliance and allyship resources, again, from Kayla's program, Do It, at the University of Washington. And then the last one is one of our favorite books. It's called Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau, who is an activist, a former advisor to the White House Council on Disability, and just has so much to say at a very kind of readable, accessible way in terms of disability and language and allyship. And so we hope those resources are useful for you all. And here is our contact information if you'd like a copy of the slides, the video links, the ones that worked and the ones that didn't. And thank you all for being here and being part of this conversation. So